Well, it's that season, it's getting warmer, and invariably what's going to happen are some of your plants are going to bolt. Well, we can minimize that, and I wanted to catch y'all early enough so we could kind of go over it, give you some tips and tricks and stuff, all that good stuff. But managing it is very difficult and it can be disheartening, and so the goal is not to have any bolting whatsoever. Just in case you don't know what bolting is, this is bolting. This is when a plant goes to seed, it puts up flowers. They may be pretty, they may not be, but invariably what's going to go on is they're going to shoot up, they're going to make flowers, and then they'll make seeds, and it doesn't become completely unedible. If you're weird and you like bitter food, go for it, but really it does make it pretty inedible. So what triggers bolting? That's what we need to go. And the common conception is it's warm weather. Well, not so much just warm weather. It's a function of the plant. It's a survival mechanism. So if we look at it and we say, what is this plant doing? Well, it's going to produce seed. So we need to figure out what triggers it. All of these are cool season crops. And really, for right now, we're doing pretty good. We don't have a whole lot of bolting going on. This plant was planted, and this is very important here. This bok choy was planted in the fall, and it's starting to bolt. Whereas all of this was planted in the fall, but it's not bolting yet. So yes, heat does have something to do with it, but what it is these plants are biennials, right? Meaning they need 2 years of growing. And this is plant years, not people years. 2 years of growing, and then they will produce seed. Well, when we planted those in the fall, we had a nice cool down. It was getting cool. And then what happened? We started getting warm days, and it's up, down, up, down. And so the plant is tricked into thinking, hey, this has been 2 years. I've gone through, because it only goes by feel. I've been hot, I've been cold, I've been hot, and then I've been cold. That means I've been through 2 seasons. Let's do this, right? And so some areas are worse than others, right? This area in particular, coastal North Carolina, good morning. Today it's going to be 75 degrees, and then next week it's going to be a high of 50. So you can see we do have all of that fluctuation going on. And so bolting is a real issue. Now, once your plant starts to bolt, there's nothing you can do about it. So you may be tempted to come to this plant and say, hey, it's bolting, let me clip it at the bottom and then regrow it. But the plant's already made its mind up. So at this point, the only thing we can do really is leave it for the pollinators if you'd like, or let it grow and collect seed, which is exactly what I'm doing here. I'm just gonna let this go, try and collect some seed and see what happens. Really overly concerned about it. It's just one plant, not a big deal. The other thing to be aware of is if you are going to leave it to collect seed, you have to remember it's going to take a long time for that plant to go to seed. So be prepared for that plant to be in your garden for a while, which means you could really mess up your garden plan. And I don't know about you, but the space that's going to take is not something I want to leave in place of a tomato or something like that. Because, you know, like for instance, lettuce stays pretty small, but once it gets big and starts to bolt, then it starts to spread out, and then it can take up a couple square feet where it would normally take up like half a square foot or something like that. So just be prepared for that. Other than lettuce, the most famous for bolting is broccoli. All right, now this is tricky. So what we know so far in this video is it's not just heat. Heat does play a factor into it, but it's also the timing and how the fluctuations in the temperature goes. But it's not necessarily the heat on the leaf that is the issue. It's the heat on the roots that's the issue. As the roots warm up, it triggers a response. And yes, the leaves do factor into it, but the common thought is, hey, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna spray my leaves down. Just spray them down, and then I will be able to, you know, minimize that root, not that root. I will be able to minimize the bolting reaction. Well, this is one reason why we switched to a drip system, because when we water, we are automatically cooling those roots down. So as we get into these days that are more and more frequent in the mid 70s and even higher, what we'll do is we will actually turn on the drip system in the middle of the day just for maybe 30 minutes just to cool those roots down. And then we can kind of help not really minimize it, but slow the process down, because truth be told, this is just a race to see how we can get this to continue to grow and not bolt. The other thing we can do if we're talking about cooling roots down, the trick is mulch. Mulch, 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 mulch. So put mulch on your bed, because what that does is if you put a good layer of a light colored mulch, again, we're gonna take it back to elementary school, the colors do matter. The lighter the color, the less heat it absorbs, and then the faster it releases it, right? So right now, we have our beds are all dark colored, so that means they're going to soak up as much heat as possible. Now as we get warmer, what you're going to end up seeing is you're going to see the mulch come out, and so that does a couple things. One, it absolutely we did a test, and I believe it was about 5 degrees cooler on the surface of the soil underneath the mulch, and this was using roughly about 2 inches of straw mulch. And then when we went even into the soil, it was even cooler than that. So it absolutely makes a difference, and you want to use that to your advantage, because this is one of the ways that we were able to get 100% broccoli harvest out of our broccoli bed last year. To make it a little bit better, what you can also do is you can even come out here and just lightly spray down the plants in the middle of the day, something like that, and that will help. You know, if you're not home, you can set a sprinkler, a timer on a sprinkler to just kind of sprinkle for 5 minutes or something, and that will cool the leaves down a little bit. But you'll start to see a change in your plants as you do that. That's another thing we can do. Well, we know we're racing against the clock, so there's 2 more things we can do. One, it's probably too late, but put it in your plan for next time, plant earlier. Right? So we know that if this broccoli, and you look, the packages and stuff say 75 days, and I get about 90-day harvest window from seed to harvest, right? So if we do that and we count back, what's your last frost date? Y'all put it in the comments in the last one. So if you take, and like mine's April 15th. Now, the difference is my climate is very hot, right? So April 15th, last frost date, probably my average high and low for that time, if I had to imagine, would be 55 and 75, right? But there's always that chance of frost in there. Now, when I was up north, my last frost date, the high would be 45 and 33. So it's a big difference, right? So what does that tell me? I need to be getting these done right around the 1st of May. They need to be between the 15th and the 1st of May. I really need to be getting my broccoli out. So I need to count back 90 days from there at minimum to get my plant started. So there's one way to do that. Now the other thing we can do, and this is something we did last year and it worked out really, really good. We fed the hell out of these plants. So they are right around the time where they're looking to get another dose of some food. We did have our issue where we put too much urea in, but you can see we have bounced back. We replaced, nothing is hurt. Everything is growing good. So at this point, within the next week or two, we're going to get the nitrogen pushed to this bed, and we're going to do it in a safer form than the urea. We're going to do it through a drip system, which isn't hooked up yet, so you know that I'm going to have to hook that up first, but we're going to push that through, and then we'll start doing that every 2 weeks. So we'll do it, let's say next week we do it, and then we'll do it the 2 weeks later, and then you will see significant growth on that. I say feed, I'm sorry, I'm not referring to putting compost in. Compost is a slow feeder. What I'm talking about is a liquid fertilizer. Can be organic, can be synthetic, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care, the plants don't care, we're the only ones that care. But when you put that in there and it feeds it immediately, you start to get that growth, right? So that plant's going to put on more leaves, which is going to create more energy, which is going to make a bigger head and faster. And we saw this last year when we did it. It made a huge, huge difference. So we're continuing down that path, because if it's a race to get it through, you don't want to be 2 weeks before your expected harvest date. For me, and I actually need to go back real quick and say, when I was living in New England, you could grow your broccoli up until like the middle of June and not really have any issues. So we had plenty of time. Here, it's really fast, right? So pushing that food to it will help it grow faster and faster. We tippy toe into the greenhouse. These have been fed and these are overdue for feeding, so they'll be getting this promptly. We are just about to the heading stage here. So they are just about ready. Now, to put it into perspective for you, we started these seeds right here in December. It's a little bit misleading. We started them out here and it gets very little sun, so they were slower to grow, and we knew that going into it. So with all that being said, this is the time frame for this now. So we're looking at 100 and some days, but it's so slow in the winter time. You know, we're talking about growing seeds in the winter solstice, and my feet are stuck on these tomatoes. Look at that. It's like I got to tippy toe out of here. These broccolis were started in January, like the middle of January, I believe, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. So you can see it takes time to get them to the stage. When we talk about timing, a lot of times we're not talking about planting earlier. We're talking about understanding how fast your plants grow. And the numbers they put on there for seed to harvest, we need to understand that's in perfect conditions with optimal growing temperatures and optimal amounts of light and optimal amounts of food, which, truth be told, no garden is going to produce that. You can't produce the perfect amount of light. I mean, if you look at this, look all around me, there's my reason why I don't get optimal light. All of that is trees and stuff like that. So you have that, and then we're growing in cooler temperatures. I do think right now is like perfect growing weather here. You know, the past week it's been 70s, 50s into the 40s. That's like perfect optimal temperatures. So we know right now we're capitalizing on as much growth as possible in these plants. But as we get warmer, that's going to slow down. And so we need to take that into account. So you can see all of these matter, all of it. And invariably, if you get bolting in your garden, you need to look at it and say, well, why did my plants bolt? Could I have planted earlier? Could I have fed more? Did I feed too much? Was there not enough water? You know, did I plant late in the season and then get a crazy warm-up spell, which is typical here, that can trigger it to bolt? So you need to start narrowing it down and you'll figure it out. But if you pay attention to it and you look at it and you try to understand it, and then you start seeing how your plants grow and what they look like, and what, like, especially for broccoli, when it's going to start producing that head, you will start to figure it out, and you can narrow it down even more and more, and your success rate is going to go through the roof.